Most investors think a surge is born from rumors, price predictions, or viral excitement. But according to Ripple's own leadership, the real catalyst comes from something far more structural. And what was said publicly just recently confirms that the activation point for XRP's next major move is now entering a defined window. Not speculation, but a shift in global liquidity conditions that institutions can no longer ignore. Before we break this open, take a moment to like this video so more XRP holders get research instead of recycled noise, and subscribe to Matrix Millionaire so you can stay ahead of every major shift in this ecosystem. And as always, this is not financial advice. It is analysis based on publicly available information from Ripple, regulators, and global liquidity data. Here's the part most people missed. Ripple leadership publicly acknowledged that the global financial system is approaching a period where real-time settlement becomes mandatory, not optional, not experimental, mandatory. And when a financial system hits that threshold, the assets that power the new rails are revalued not by emotion, but by necessity. In that same discussion, Ripple executives emphasized that institutional adoption does not show up as a chart pattern. It shows up first in liquidity pressure, the exact point when cross-border flows, tokenized assets, and currency settlement begin demanding speed that legacy rails can no longer provide. That moment, the moment when the old system begins to strain, is the true beginning of the surge window. And the wording Ripple used was unmistakable. They spoke about global settlement moving from innovation cycles into implementation cycles. That shift has a timeline. It begins when liquidity stress rises across foreign exchange markets, bond markets, and tokenized value flows. And right now, all three of those markets are compressing at the same time. That alignment is what opens the surge window, the first real date range where the system is structurally forced to lean on faster rails. This is why what was said changes everything. Most investors are looking for a countdown clock. Ripple is pointing to a liquidity cycle, a cycle that creates a clear activation phase, one that aligns with settlement mandates, regulatory timelines, and corridor expansion already visible in Ripple's public reports. That is the confirmed surge window. Not a day on a calendar, but a system entering its critical transition point. And for anyone paying attention, the signals are unmistakable. We're going to break down the exact mechanics behind this activation phase, how liquidity stress flows through the system, why Ripple leadership acknowledged it publicly, and why this shift is the moment the market will be forced to reprice XRP. To understand why Ripple's recent comments matter so much, you have to understand how liquidity stress moves through the global financial system. Because when liquidity tightens in one market, it forces movement in another. And when multiple markets tighten together, foreign exchange, sovereign bonds, and tokenized instruments, the entire settlement architecture is pushed toward faster rails. That pressure creates a structural need, and a structural need is what opens the surge window. Ripple's public reports make this clear. During periods of rising settlement demand, on-demand liquidity corridors begin absorbing more volume, even if the broader market appears calm. This disconnect, quiet price action paired with rising corridor activity, is the first sign that institutions are preparing for transition. They increase throughput quietly, privately, through controlled channels that are designed to stabilize volume before the public markets ever see it. This is why Ripple leadership emphasized that global settlement is moving from innovation to implementation. When implementation begins, institutions stop running experiments and start building dependencies. They need faster settlement because the underlying markets are tightening. And when markets tighten, the rails that cannot keep up become a risk. That risk is what forces institutions into the new system. Gold and bond markets are perfect examples. Gold responds to macro uncertainty, but its settlement is still slow. Bonds react to interest rate pressure, but the liquidity rotation behind them is enormous. Neither market can remain tied to slow settlement in a world where tokenized value is moving in real time. And as more assets become digitized, from securities to money market instruments, the liquidity pathways connecting those assets must settle instantly. That requirement is what Ripple has been preparing for. Not a hype cycle, not a speculative moment, an institutional liquidity shift. And here's the part most people overlook. Settlement rails do not simply speed up by themselves. They need a neutral asset to bridge value between jurisdictions, currencies, and networks. That neutral asset must be liquid, fast, reliable, and independent of any single nation's monetary policy. Ripple built XRP for that exact purpose. So when global liquidity enters compression, the system naturally gravitates toward whatever asset can equalize flows. This is why the recent Ripple comments hit so hard. They did not present a theory, they acknowledged an active transition. XRP is not waiting for a bull market. It is being aligned with the same market forces that determine how gold moves, how bonds rotate, and how institutions manage cross-border liquidity under pressure. Ripple's escrow reports add another layer to this. Each month, the amount of XRP available for private institutional sourcing becomes more defined. And as utility demand increases, those private channels tighten. Once institutional demand outpaces OTC availability, open market liquidity becomes part of the equation. That crossover, when institutions must tap into public supply, is one of the clearest structural signals that a repricing event is inevitable. When Ripple executives talk about settlement moving into its implementation phase, they are indirectly signaling that these conditions are forming. A system that once tolerated slow settlement is now approaching the point where inefficiency is unsustainable. That is the surge window, the period where the system itself forces adoption. In the final section, we're going to connect this liquidity transition to the statement Ripple leadership made, the line that confirms the shift has begun, and show why this moment will not just move XRP, it will redefine how the entire market values it. The moment Ripple leadership confirmed the shift, most people missed it because they were listening for excitement instead of structure. But institutions don't speak in excitement. They signal through necessity. And the statement that global settlement is moving into its implementation phase is the clearest confirmation we have ever received that the financial system is entering the very window XRP was designed for. Implementation is not a prediction. It is a mandate. It means the rails are ready. It means the old system is reaching its limits. It means liquidity providers, banks, and payment networks are no longer evaluating faster settlement as a possibility. They are preparing to rely on it. And when reliance begins, the rails powering that liquidity become essential infrastructure. That is the real surge trigger. It isn't tied to retail speculation or market sentiment. It is tied to the moment institutions begin operating on infrastructure that requires XRP to function. And that requirement does not wait for perfect sentiment. It does not wait for headlines. It does not wait for hype. It emerges the moment the system demands it, and Ripple's latest statements make it clear that demand is no longer theoretical. Here's why that matters. Once institutions depend on XRP for settlement, the asset is no longer valued like a cryptocurrency. It is valued like liquidity infrastructure. Its price becomes a reflection of throughput, not opinion. A reflection of global settlement volume, not daily retail emotion. A reflection of the system it supports. A system that moves trillions of dollars every single day. Most investors are still watching for a chart pattern, but the people who understand macro liquidity know this shift doesn't appear as a spike. It appears as a repricing, a structural reset that brings XRP in line with the role it's being positioned to fill. That reset happens quietly, right up until the moment it doesn't. And if you're here right now, that tells me something important about you. You're not following noise. You're tracking signals. You're paying attention to the system itself, not the distractions around it. So before you go, support the community of people who think the same way. Tap like so more holders get access to research grounded in real data. Subscribe to Matrix Millionaire so you stay ahead of every structural shift and every institutional signal the market never explains. And comment one word below, activated, because that is exactly where we are now. The rails are activating, the system is transitioning, and the surge window Ripple hinted at is no longer on the horizon. It has begun. Welcome to Matrix Millionaire. The next phase starts now.